Hello and welcome back to the MBC Sports Podcast. My name's Andrew Sulliver. I'm joined by Connell Scruggs and JP Eisenhower today. Unfortunately, Andrew Feeney unable to join us today for Season 3, Week 7 on the MBC Sports Podcast. Coming into another football week finally, Marist set to take on Hapeville Charter Friday, 7:30 at Hughes Spalding at home. Should be a really good one, Connell.
Right. I'm excited for this game. Hapeville is one of those teams that's pretty good all around at all aspects of the game. One player I'd look for to perform in this game is running back Wanye Thompson. He's just a sophomore, but he's a tough runner and he's got agility. He often makes the first defender miss with a spin move. He's pretty quick. Hapeville likes to spread the defense out. They usually do like quads with the receiver, so they spread out the defense, and then they like to run it between the tackles. So try to get one-on-one matchups for the running back. But he's pretty talented there, and I'd be excited to see him play in this game.
No, and JP, one of the concerns I think for Hapeville is just their inexperience and a lot of young players starting for that Hornets or Yellow Jackets team.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at it, they've been thrown into the fire early. You look at it, they've had to play against North Forsyth and Milton, two 7A teams. They lost both of those games, but you really can't penalize them for that. Those are two incredible teams. When you look at North Forsyth, they were only down by one going into the fourth, and they just couldn't pull it out in the fourth. But they did have negative rushing yards in that game, which is definitely a major concern. But against Milton, they were never outscored by more than 8 in a single quarter, although the final score was much larger in that game. They had an 80-yard and a 78-yard passing touchdown against Milton in the second quarter, which was their two main highlights in that game. Losing to two very highly talented 7A schools is not something you could hold over this team, but I think that those two games are definitely going to help bring some experience into this Marist game.
Yeah, and I think another concern is turnovers. They have to play cleaner football. They've had 8 turnovers in 3 games so far this season, which against a Marist team that has looked so dominant early, you can't afford to turn the ball over because Marist will likely capitalize on turnovers and penalties, a lot of penalties early on. They need to clean it up against Marist this week. And another concern would be special teams. Kicking game hasn't been great, so if they score touchdowns, important for them to succeed on 2-point conversions. Those could be the difference in a close game.
Right, and I think another important thing on offense is that offensive line is going to have to try to do their best to fend off the Marist defensive line, especially in pass protection, because they have quarterback Rashad Render, who is just a freshman at the helm. So under pressure, he's looked a little bit flustered in situations, double clutched, hesitated. That's caused him to get sacked pretty far behind the line of scrimmage a couple of times, just trying to escape the pocket. So if they can give him a good chance and some time to make decisions, I think he'll have a better chance to make some good throws in this game.
Yeah, I think stay ahead of the downs. I think you need to get into third and manageable situations with that young freshman quarterback starting. Avoid turning the ball over and just put him in situations to succeed, which will be difficult against this Marist team. Great at getting a pass rush off the edge with Lincoln Parker and Derek McDonald. Lincoln Parker back to full strength after an ankle injury earlier this season. As for Marist, it's going to be interesting to see coming off of a quick quarantine. They've been out for 2 weeks, haven't played a game in 21 days coming into this one. JP, how do you think they respond to that?
Well, I think when you look at it, this is a Coach Chadwick coach team. He's definitely prepared this team well, and when you look at it, they've definitely been watching film. I think that having this extra time off, you've been watching Hapeville film, you've been working towards Hapeville. I think that it's not going to affect them as big as people might expect, but I think it will definitely have an impact on this game, just not physically being out there. I think the one thing you need to look for is the possibility that you have some injuries just for not being out there, not working for a couple weeks.
Yeah, and another thing for Marist is they haven't played a close game yet. They've won each game by 20-plus points, whereas Hapeville has played these challenging games against better opponents. They've had to work for their wins. They beat Mays 21-0 last week, and a game that was probably should have been closer than it was because Mays got the ball inside of Hapeville territory a few times off of turnovers and couldn't convert. And that's the thing with this Marist team. They'll be looking to convert, likely will convert if you give the ball to them in your own territory. So the turnovers will be huge. And Xavier Carter could be a force to watch in this one, Connell.
Right. Xavier Carter, 6'7", 170 to 180 pounds, defensive end. They got him at a defensive end, but he's more built like more of an outside linebacker, edge rusher type. He's extremely fast. You see in the games they've played, he gets off the line very quickly, employs the swim move, and can get to the quarterback really quickly. So that's something that the Marist offensive line is going to have to watch for. He's extremely fast and he's got length. So runs, he can influence runs with his arms left and right side. He's a kind of a two-gap player. He can do a lot of things for that defense there at Hapeville.
Yeah, he's your prototypical 3-4 outside linebacker. He's going to be the biggest test for this Marist offensive line, and this is where we're really going to see this senior veteran offensive line for Marist just see how good they are this year.
Yeah, and the tackles, Davis McKenna and then Ian Erickson could have their hands full. I mean, this is one of the best offensive lines we've ever seen at Marist in history, and we'll see. This will be their real first test with an edge rusher. They haven't allowed much pressure. This could be the first time they've come up against a serious defensive line, including Carter.
And one thing that's going to be a big concern is Hayden Richardson as a new quarterback. How's he going to deal with pressure?
Yeah, and he hasn't had to deal with much so far. And add on to all of that, this game could be for the region championship. I know both teams still have to play Stevenson, who's ranked in the top 10 of 4A, but it's looking like these could be the top two teams in our Region 6 Quad A, and this one could determine the region championship and the number one seed from the region into the state playoffs, which is important. Marist hasn't won a region championship back until 2017, I think, was the last time.
Right.
They beat Blessed Trinity on that miracle.
That's a classic.
Miracle 2-minute drive. Abshir with the touchdown. Kyle Hamilton.
Fitzpatrick now playing at Georgia.
Yeah, and Hamilton with the 2-point conversion. That was classic in Marist history. And that team went on to state runner-up finish that year. So Marist looking for a region championship this year for the first time in 3 years. And this Friday could be one step in the right direction against Hapeville. As we take a look at the 4A rankings here, composite 4A rankings, Marist still number 1, 3-0 on the season. 2 weeks off. Hapeville this Friday. Jefferson number 2, 5-0. Malachi Starks, their quarterback, 5-star athlete, has looked very good. They beat Flowery Branch, a top 10 team in Quad A, 40-10 last week in a dominant performance. And they did not complete a pass for, I think, the third time this season in a game they haven't completed the pass. Their offensive line is dominant. They love to run the ball. A team that matches up similar to Marist. Shut down defense, run the ball a lot. Marist has implemented more passing over the past few years, but a very good comparison between Jefferson and Marist, top two teams in 4A. Benedictine remains at number 3 despite a loss last week, moving to 5-1. They lost 43-21 to Ware County. Got down early and really couldn't get back. Carver Columbus, a team that's looked good, and JP we'll talk about in a few minutes in our games of the week. They were off last week, I believe, but they're 3-0 on the season, averaging 54 points a game offensively. They could be a force this year. Stevenson at number 5. I talked about them a minute ago in Region 6 4A with Marist and Hapeville. 2-0 so far this season, but last week they beat Arabia Mountain 7-0. Probably not the result they were looking for against a middle-of-the-road Arabia Mountain team that will likely finish somewhere around 5th in the Region 6. They probably were looking to put up a few more points, so that one could be scary for them offensively. They need to do a little bit better of a job. Then Bainbridge had the off week last week. They're at 6, 1-3. Flowery Branch 3-2 at number 7 with that loss to Jefferson. Northwest Whitfield undefeated 4-0 at number 8. Hapeville 1-2 at number 9. And then Islands from down in Savannah, they're number 10 at 2-0. As we move into our games of the week this week, a few good ones. North Gwinnett and Mill Creek should be a really good one. North Gwinnett number 10 in 7A. They're 4-2. Mill Creek number 7 in 7A. They're 2-2. North Gwinnett actually favored by 3 in this one, Connell.
Right. This is going to be a great game, I think. Extremely close. North Gwinnett defeated number 6, North Cobb, 16-0 last week, which ended their 2-game losing streak and put them back into the top 10. They had kind of slid a little bit, losing 2 games in a row, which we didn't expect after them beating Parkview 3 weeks ago. That was a huge win for them. But a huge thing for North Gwinnett this week, they're going to get back Clemson committed linebacker Barrett Carter, who came back from injury, and Ohio State committed cornerback Jordan Hancock, who originally opted out but is going to rejoin the team on defense. So that's going to definitely make their already extremely powerful defense even better. But looking at the offensive side, North Gwinnett has excelled in the run game with Marcus McFarland compiling 476 rushing yards this season. They've been a lot more dominant in the run game than they have in the pass game, where they've struggled a little bit. And looking at the flip side, Mill Creek, who's 2-2. Now that record might scare you a little bit right at the beginning, but when you look at their two losses, it's been to number 4 Brookwood and number 2 Grayson, who they went into double overtime last week, which is that's extremely good. That Grayson roster is one of the most talented we've seen in a long time in high school. But like North Gwinnett, Mill Creek has been more impressive on defense and in the run game, and been a little bit shaky in the pass game. But in the run game, they've been led by Josh Battle, who's run for 298 yards. Now, this is going to be, it's two teams who are very similarly constructed, as I've said. But I think I'm going to go with North Gwinnett here just because of those two impact players coming back.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one to pick here. You mentioned those two guys coming back. For Mill Creek, for them, it's going to be interesting to see how they respond to that Grayson loss. Almost pulled the upset of number 1, number 2, depending on what poll you look at it in all of the state, nationally ranked Grayson. Almost pulled the upset. Double overtime, losing by 7. I mean, you hung tough with them. Now, how do you respond to that? Because you thought you might get that upset, and now you don't. So it's going to be interesting to see how Mill Creek responds to this one. Plus, this is a region game. This one could determine the region championship, so a big one for those two teams. I'm going to take North Gwinnett just because they got those two players back, Hancock and Carter. But I'm a little concerned. Those two losses don't look good because they've done well against ranked competition in 7A, but those two losses don't look good, and they're facing a tough Mill Creek team. Hardest pick of the week, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at North Gwinnett, it feels like they play up to the better competition and they play down to the worst competition. I think this week against a good Mill Creek team, they'll play up to the competition and they'll end up winning this game.
And Feeney actually submitted his picks to us this week. He took Mill Creek in this one. And our second game here, Carver Columbus, number 4 in 4A, 3-0 on the season, taking on LaGrange, number 12 in 4A, 4-1. Carver Columbus favored by 12. JP.
Yeah, I mean, LaGrange has been doing some great things with the new head coach, leading them to a 4-1 record. But Carver Columbus has the top-ranked offense, scoring 53 points per game, and the number 4 defense only giving up 6 points per game in Class 4A. When you look at quarterback Devin Riles, he has a 74% completion percentage. He has 430 yards, 163 yards rushing. He has 12 combined touchdowns. And then you look at the rushing game with Cradle, rushing for 283 yards and 5 touchdowns. They're coming off a bye week, so they have that extra week to prepare. I think Carver Columbus wins this one.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. I think that offense is a little too explosive for LaGrange, but LaGrange has been really down recently. I think 6-34 over their last 4 seasons. New head coach Matt Napier getting things back on track for one of the most storied programs in the state. I don't think they can quite get Carver Columbus this week. That offense a little too explosive. I'll take Carver Columbus, but a big region game. That one, again, could decide the region champion.
Right, and I'm going to agree with both of you. I'm going to go with Carver Columbus here. I think they've just been too dominant over their past few games.
And Feeney taking the upset again this week, or again in this game, he takes LaGrange. Our final one for high school this week, Athens Academy, Westland. Athens Academy, number 1 ranked in single A private. That's a little bit of a shock because usually Elka has that spot. They're 5-0, 8-point favorites over Westland, number 5 in single A private, and 4-1. Athens Academy has been really good this season. Defensively, haven't allowed more than 14 points in a game. Very balanced offense with Charlie Chisholm, who has rushed for almost 500 yards. Notre Dame wide receiver commit Dion Colsey, 250 yards receiving, and quarterback Palmer Bush thrown for over 750 yards. They haven't had tough competition, though, and that worries me a little bit because Westland has. Westland only lost on the season to Prince Avenue, who's the number 3 ranked team in single A private. And Brock Vandegrift, they lost 52-26. They're coming off state runner-up last year. Had to replace quarterback J.C. French, who transferred to Blessed Trinity, but they've done so with Ryan Rose, who's already thrown for over 1,000 yards. I don't think it's going to be quite enough against this tough defensive Athens Academy team, though.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there, Andrew. I'm going to go with Athens Academy. I think they've started off extremely hot, and they got the number 1 spot. I think they're going to try to defend it here against Wesleyan. We'll see what they're really made of, though, in this game.
Yeah, I think Athens Academy wins this one. I think they even cover the spread.
Yeah, and 3 upset picks by Feeney this week in high school. He takes Wesleyan
Not a bad
Wolves
pick,
in this
though.
one. No, not all very close games,
Yes.
I think. And now we'll move into college. A few good games this week. One in particular that we'll touch on in a few minutes. But JP, Auburn, South Carolina, really interesting one given that Auburn's been struggling recently.
Yeah, I mean, we are coming in before the college football schedule started. We were talking about Auburn being a team to watch as winning the SEC West. Now we're
Was talked
wondering
about. You're
if
right.
they're going to win against South Carolina, and I think Auburn wins this one. I think it's going to be closer than it should be. I think it's going to end up being kind of similar to the score that Auburn beat Kentucky by.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Auburn, but man, this is the least confident I've been about picking Auburn in a long time, except against Alabama. With that premise, this is the least confident I've been. They were really shaky to start the season, but I think they're just a better team than South Carolina.
Feeney also took Auburn, but I'm going to take South Carolina Gamecocks. 2 tough games to start the season. Tennessee almost won that one, and then Florida they lost to by 14, I believe. And then they came back with a dominant win over Vanderbilt last week. I think South Carolina can get it done. Auburn looked horrible. Should have lost the game to Arkansas last week.
That was robbery.
Cost me 3 points.
That was messed up.
Cost me 3 points in an upset
If
pick.
the refs didn't call it,
By
never
the way.
happened.
And I'll update you on the point standings. I have 31. Connell and JP 28 points. And Feeney 27. I should have 34 with that upset pick.
You got to give me credit for the comeback, though.
Yeah.
I made a comeback with my upset pick. It was huge.
I think I'll take South Carolina, though, because I think they're coming off that dominant win, getting things rolling, and Auburn just,
right.
Oh, goodness. I don't even know what to say about them. So I'll take South Carolina there. And our other mediocre SEC game, but tough SEC game to pick, Ole Miss, Arkansas. Both teams have looked, I think we can say, better than expected.
Definitely.
Arkansas, definitely. New head coach over there. They should be 2-1. They're not. They're 1-2, but they should be 2-1. And imagine if they got that win, they would have wins over 2 storied teams in the SEC.
Right.
But I think Ole Miss pulls this one out with those 2 quarterbacks, Corral and Plumlee. They're looking to really speed the game up. Alabama couldn't stop them. I don't know.
Nope.
I don't know who can. Maybe Georgia. I don't think Arkansas gets any stops this week, and they need them. But Ole Miss needs to put pressure on Felipe Franks because he does well when he has time in the pocket. He's looked pretty good this season. Arkansas defenses look good, but I don't see him stopping that explosive Rebel offense.
Right. I'm going to go with Ole Miss. After seeing what they did to my Alabama defense last week, I don't think I can pick against them here. That offense, Bama could not find an answer to that offense. It was ridiculous. Matt Corral, they had 2 running backs rush for over 100 yards. I'm going to go with Ole Miss. They're not going to be stopped.
Yeah, Ole Miss so far scored 35, 42, and 48. Arkansas 10, 21, and 28. I just don't think Ole Miss can outscore. Arkansas can outscore Ole Miss.
And Feeney made it 4 for Ole Miss. And the big one this week, Saturday night primetime in T-Town. Number 3 ranked Georgia Bulldogs coming off some big wins already against Tennessee and Auburn. Meanwhile, the number 2 ranked Crimson Tide haven't played a top-ranked team, but they did have a close one against.
A&M,
they had a close one against Ole Miss last week.
Connell, 11.
They don't count.
It's a really tough game to pick. Nick Saban out. Do you think that makes a difference?
I think it's going to make a difference in terms of the leadership, like the kind of the energy on the sideline. Nick Saban just kind of has an energy about him that brings the players together, kind of gets them fired up for the game. And without his presence kind of on the sideline, that's definitely might affect the morale. But in terms of game plan and execution during the game, I don't see much of an effect because Saban's big schematics, they happen before in the preparation, not during the game. And also, the offensive and defensive coordinators are making the actual play calls. And I'm sure Saban is going to be hooked up somewhere with the connection to talk. He's going to be able to talk to them, is my bottom line. They're going to find some way to get him communicating with the OC and the DC. So I think schematics wise, it's not going to affect much, but leadership wise, I think, and morale wise, it could have an effect there.
And TV wise, they don't get to show
Right,
Saban,
they don't get to show
Saban
him
on TV.
They don't get to show him yelling at people on the sideline about every 5
minutes. Who are they
minutes.
going to show now?
Right.
Exactly. Who's gonna get, that's my point. Who's going to get on the players' cases when they mess up?
Right.
Who's going to be that guy on the sideline? When you look at it, if you don't have him on the sideline, I get he doesn't call plays, but it's like if you have to take, I know you're an Alabama fan, you got to take Alabama out of it. If you look at the Patriots, if Bill Belichick is not on that sideline, he doesn't call plays. Josh McDaniels calls the offense. I think their linebackers coach calls the defense. When you don't have him there, it's so different. Like, you need Bill Belichick there, or the Patriots team is completely different without him.
JP, if you're Georgia, how do you stop this Alabama offense?
I think you stop it by just being the defense you've been the first 3 weeks of the season. I mean, when you look at how Georgia's played, they have not allowed a rushing touchdown since 2018, and the last person to rush for a touchdown was that SEC championship against Alabama. It was Josh Jacobs.
And what team did he play for, JP?
It was Alabama.
Yeah,
I said Alabama.
okay.
But when you look at it, Georgia's defense has played absolutely incredible. I mean, you could argue they're
You're
the
right.
best-
No,
they're
they
the
are.
best defense
They are the best
in
defense in college
right
football.
now. And when you look at it, I mean, in a season where SEC, sadly, the defense is becoming optional.
It's like Big 12 a little bit.
Yeah.
When you look at it,
Except a little better.
Yeah, a little
a little better
They don't beat each other up as much.
Right.
And a little better is an understatement when you're talking about the Big 12. But when you look at it compared to Alabama's defense looks horrible. It looks like LSU's defense when they were trying to stop Mizzou's offense, who finally took off to upset the national champions 45-41, stopping them 4 times inside the 1 yard line.
Connell, offensively, Alabama has looked unstoppable. You think there's any chance Georgia stops them this week? Like, there's so many options.
There's definitely. Something's got to give. The number one offense, Alabama, facing the number one defense, Georgia. Something's got to give. Somebody's got to be stopped here. And I think if you're Georgia, like the question before, the first thing that's got to be done is stop the run, make Mac Jones one-dimensional, make him throw the ball, and get pressure on him. I think if you can do the things, you have a little bit more of a chance at stopping Alabama's offense, but it's definitely not an easy task. I mean, look at the weapons they have. Devontae Smith, who's got the potential to be a first-round draft pick. You got Jalen Waddle, who his speed is pretty much unmatched, and his ability to get in space. And then you got Najee Harris. He's in the Heisman contention at running back. Also added John Mechie III, who's kind of shown up as the Z receiver for Alabama, and he's making plays. And then you got Mac Jones, who's delivering the ball pretty much on the dot. It's been way less of a drop-off from Tua than we expected last year, and I think that's been huge. And then you add the offensive line, which is
the best in the country.
Definitely the best in the country. So you look at that, and I mean, man, that offense is hard to stop, but Georgia's definitely got the best chance out of any other team to stop them.
And I think for Georgia, it's like, who do you pick to defend? I mean,
Right.
Mechie, Waddle, Smith, Najee Harris. I mean, you can't theoretically stop all 4 of them, but on the other side of the ball, for Alabama, who do you choose to stop? Pickens, who's technically their top receiver, or Kerryon Johnson, who has been
not Kerryon. It's I can't remember his name, but I know who you're talking. It's K Johnson. K Johnson.
Who do you choose to stop? Because he's been the bigger threat over Pickens.
Right.
And for Alabama in the secondary, I mean, Surtain is your main guy. Who do you put him on?
I put Surtain on Pickens. You got to have him one-on-one on the outside because Pickens is kind of more of a vertical threat, a little bit more deep threat. And if you're Alabama, you gotta take away the middle of the field from Stetson Bennett in the passing lanes because that's where he's excelled the most in his game so far. Is the middle of the field passes to Johnson. Johnson's been a threat in the middle of the field. So you got to take that away first and then kind of trust your speed on the outside. You got to trust the speed in the linebacking core to get to outside runs, little quick passes to the screens. It's going to have to come down to that. You got to take away what Georgia does best first and then evaluate after that because Georgia's offense is a threat too. You got to take away what they do best first. You can't take away everything at once. It's kind of hard to do.
I think one thing that you have to look at though is who wins if you're looking at going back to the Alabama offense versus Georgia defense. Does great defense beat great offense? And I think great defense always beats great offense. When you look at it, when Alabama had the great offense going against Clemson's great defense in the national championship, Alabama's offense was completely stopped. They looked horrible.
Yeah, I think
Tagovailoa was completely kept in check.
You know-
They only scored 16 points.
yeah, in that game, I think Saban just got out coached. Honestly, I think Dabo Sweeney and Brent Venables just out coached Alabama in that game.
It's Kearis Jackson, by the way, the
Kearis Jackson.
second
he's a
receiver
threat,
for
man.
Georgia. But
Hey,
real
don't
quick
forget him.
before we pick the game, JP, Stetson Bennett, do you think he steps up this week?
I think he does. When you look at him, look, he's taken over the team. He walked on. He was a fourth quarterback, became the backup, thrust in the game week 1, and he's the clear starter. And the passing offense right now is better than it was last year at the end of the season under Jake Fromm. I don't know how he's going to be in the future. Right now, I think I'd compare him to kind of an Alex Smith. He's that game manager, and that's what UGA needs. They just need that guy who's not going to make the big mistake.
Right, and I think that's exactly what I was going to say, JP. Just don't make the big mistake against Alabama because momentum is going to be huge in this game. You know it's going to be huge. It's being played in Tuscaloosa. You don't want that big pick in the red zone or something like Mac Jones against Auburn last year. The big pick off the back of Najee Harris. It just turns the game around. Those momentum swings can decide a huge game like this. And Alabama, Georgia in the past 4 years, even past 6 years, has been instant classics all across the board every time these two teams play.
All right, let's pick it. Connell, you can't go against your tide, can you?
I think I'm going with Alabama here. I think this is going to be the biggest test we've had in a long time. I'm excited to see it, though. I'm pumped for this game. I got Alabama.
I'll take Alabama as well. Too many weapons. JP?
I think this is going to be a reverse of the SEC championship in 2018. I think Georgia wins this one. When you look at it, it's going to be a really close game. And in a close game, Alabama finds a way. And Alabama finds a way to miss that field goal. The spreads right now is 3 points. And if it comes down to a field goal, Alabama's only attempted 2 field goals, one being a 34-yarder, and that's the longest one so far. And I don't trust Alabama kicking field goals still. I will never trust Alabama kicking a field goal.
Well, a lot
I'll give you that.
of times they don't need to kick field goals, JP.
Hey, but I think Georgia's offense, I think it ends up being a 27-24 Georgia win.
Feeney has Georgia, by the way, as well. So 2-2
We're
there.
split here.
Yeah. And we'll go into upset picks real quick. JP, even though it's wrong, who do you have?
This will be right because Boston College
Wow.
is the most underrated team in college football right now. Virginia Tech showed a complete lack of defense last week. They're going to have to completely rely on their offense to win games. And Boston College is a very complete team. They've played offense and defense fairly well throughout the season. They also had a great game last week versus Pitt. I really like the Notre Dame transfer, Phil Jurkovic, at quarterback. And like I said last week, this team is very underrated. And I think that Boston College should be a ranked team, and I think they will be after they upset number 23 Virginia Tech.
Let me remind you just that Virginia Tech was missing like 15 players last week, so you can't hold that against them. They competed still with that 15 players out against UNC, so I think that one won't work out for you. You'll move to 0-14 on upset picks, but I'll take
13.
no. I'll take Florida State over UNC this week. I think Florida State has looked better than they looked week 1.
Okay, that's a start.
Yeah, I think
they were down 14-0 to Jacksonville State.
Oh, I know. But I mean, last week against Notre Dame, rather, they found this new quarterback, Jordan Travis. He's looked pretty good once they've brought him in. They competed in the first half with Notre Dame. And Notre Dame is a lot better than UNC, I think.
A lot.
I think UNC is heavily overrated. They almost lost to Boston College, almost blew a huge lead against Virginia Tech last week. I don't think they're a top 10 team in football and college football, let alone a top 5 team. I have Florida State with a big upset win because they need to get on the right track. Connell?
All right, I got Pitt over number 13 Miami. It's a 13-point spread. Pitt has lost 2 consecutive games by 1 point. Last week versus Boston College, as you mentioned, and the week before versus NC State. Before that, they started 3-0. I think they got a chance to compete with Miami. Give me Pitt.
Yeah, Miami looked overmatched last week against Clemson. And Feeney taking South Florida over Temple, 10.5-point underdog there. That'll wrap us up this week. Tomorrow night, 7:30, Marist Tapeville. Marist back in action for the first time in 21 days, and in a big one that could determine the region championship. Maybe the best team Marist sees all regular season. Woodward was pretty good, but this could be the best game we see all season. It'll be live on the NFHS Network and NBC Sports. Connell and I'll have the call. It should be a good one. So make sure to tune in if you can't make it out to the game. But until then, signing off on behalf of JP Eisenhower and Connell Scruggs, my name's Andrew Sulliver. Have a great weekend, everybody.